It was one of those bitter, cold January mornings, the kind where winter felt endless. I was 12 years old, sitting in Mrs. Dawson's math class at Lakewood Middle School, struggling to pay attention. Outside, the blizzard had swallowed everything, turning the world into a white void. The windows rattled, the wind howled like a wild animal, and even the old classroom heater struggled to keep up. Mrs. Dawson's voice was steady and calm, explaining long division on the chalkboard, but I barely heard her. I kept glancing at the window, watching the snow swirl, my mind somewhere else. I was thinking about Dad. He drove the county snowplows, and in storms like this, his job was dangerous. Icy roads, car crashes, no guarantees. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they lingered, like a shadow at the edge of my mind. Then, it happened. A knock at the door, not a gentle tap, a sharp, deliberate knock. Everyone froze. Even Mrs. Dawson paused, her chalk hovering in midair as she turned toward the door. The room went so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. Something felt off. When she opened the door, the man standing there wasn't familiar. He was tall, his broad shoulders wrapped in a heavy coat, dusted with fresh snow. A hat was pulled low, shadowing most of his face, but what little I saw, his jaw, his eyes, sent a chill through me. His expression wasn't angry or rushed, but there was something wrong about the way he stood there. Too stiff, too forced. Then his gaze swept across the classroom, too quickly, before landing on me. "I'm here for Clara Well," he said. "Her father's been in an accident." My breath hitched. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just the word accident made my chest tighten. Dad, it had to be him. I pictured the worst, his truck overturned, trapped in the freezing cold. My heart pounded as the man took a step forward. His boots left wet prints on the tile. "He's at St. Luke's Hospital," he continued. "He asked for Clara, said there wasn't any time to waste." Mrs. Dawson hesitated. Her hands tightened on the doorframe, her expression shifting into something unreadable. "Did he send you?" she asked. The man nodded quickly, almost too quickly. "Yes," he said. "I'm a friend of his. He told me to come straight here." I felt everyone's eyes on me. Mrs. Dawson finally gave a small, hesitant nod. My legs felt shaky as I grabbed my coat and backpack, following the man out into the storm. The second we stepped outside, the cold hit me like a slap. The wind was relentless, whipping snow against my face, tearing through my coat like it was nothing. His car was parked just a few feet away, an old dented sedan, half buried in snow. Something about it looked wrong. I hesitated. "Come on," he said, opening the passenger door. His gloved hand gripped my shoulder. Firm. Too firm. I swallowed hard and climbed inside. The inside of the car was worse. The air was stale, heavy with the faint scent of gasoline and damp upholstery. The heater barely worked, only offering a weak, wheezing warmth. The seats were cracked and stiff. He got in, shut the door without a word, and started the engine. We pulled away from the curb. The tires crunched over the ice and snow, the headlights cutting through the storm. At first, I didn't think much of the route. The snow was falling so hard that I could barely make out the road through the frosted windshield. But after a few minutes, I started noticing things. The streetlights disappeared. The familiar houses and storefronts were gone. The car was moving too fast, faster than anyone should be driving in weather like this. A tight knot formed in my stomach. "This isn't the way to St. Luke's," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look at me. "It's a shortcut," he replied, his tone flat, clipped. I stared at him. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Dad always said, there are no shortcuts in storms like this. Something was wrong. Terribly, obviously wrong. I gripped the edge of the seat so tightly that my fingers ached. "Are you sure?" I asked. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the steering wheel. Then he spoke. "Listen," he snapped. "Your dad's in critical condition. You want to waste time arguing, or do you want to see him?" His words stung. For a moment, I felt like I was the one in the wrong, but the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. If anything, it got worse. The trees pressed closer on either side of the road, dark shapes looming in the storm. I realized something. I didn't recognize anything. We weren't just lost. We were somewhere I had never been before. And for the first time, the truth hit me. I wasn't going to the hospital. I was being taken somewhere else. The realization hit me like ice water. I wasn't going to the hospital. I was being taken somewhere else. My pulse hammered in my throat as I forced myself to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help. I needed to think. I needed to get out. I glanced at the car door. Locked. My hands tightened into fists. Stay calm. Don't let him know you know. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay steady. How much longer? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. Not long. Outside, the trees were thick and endless, their dark shapes barely visible through the swirling storm. I had no idea where we were. No houses, no signs, no roads I recognized. I reached into my pocket, searching for my phone. Nothing. I must have left it in class. My stomach twisted. I was alone with him. No way to call for help. I needed to do something. Fast. I let out a shaky breath, trying to sound casual. I don't feel good, I muttered, shifting in my seat. I think I'm going to throw up. That got his attention. What? I covered my mouth, groaning. I get carsick. The storm, the motion. I need air. Please pull over. For the first time, he looked uncertain. His fingers tensed on the wheel. We don't have time for that, I whimpered, curling into myself. Please, I think I'm going to be sick all over the car. That did it. With a frustrated sigh, he jerked the car to the side of the road. The second he slowed down, I acted. I grabbed the door handle with both hands, yanked as hard as I could. It didn't budge. The child locks. My stomach dropped. Then, his hand clamped around my wrist. What the hell do you think you're doing? He growled. His grip was too tight, too strong. I twisted, kicked. Anything to get free. His face twisted in anger. You think you're smart, huh? He hissed. You think you can get away? Panic surged through me. I did the only thing I could. I screamed, loud as I possibly could. His eyes widened. For just a second, he flinched. I took my chance. I threw my elbow into his ribs. Hard. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough. I lunged for the gear shift. With every ounce of strength, I yanked it into neutral. The car jerked, slowed. He swore, reaching for the wheel, but it was too late. I slammed my foot on the emergency brake. The tires skidded. The car lurched to a stop. For a split second, we both sat there, breathing hard. Then, I unlocked my seatbelt and dove for the door. This time, it opened. I hit the icy ground hard, scrambling to my feet. The snow was thick, slowing me down, but I ran anyway. Behind me, I heard him shouting, cursing. Then, footsteps. He was chasing me. I ran harder. Branches scratched my arms, the wind howling in my ears. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. Then, lights. Up ahead, through the trees. A house. A real house. A chance. I ran faster, lungs burning. My legs felt like ice, but I didn't stop. I burst into the clearing, sprinting toward the porch. I hit the door, pounding with both fists. Help! Please! Behind me, I could hear his footsteps getting closer. Then, the porch light flicked on. The door swung open. An older man stood there, confused but alert. What's going on? I shoved past him, gasping. Call the police! Before he could even react. The car engine roared to life. I spun around just in time to see it. The man, driving away. The car disappeared into the storm, swallowed by the snow. The police arrived minutes later. They searched, but he was gone. No license plate, no ID, nothing. It was like he had never been there at all. For weeks, I barely slept. I jumped at every sound, every passing car, because I knew he was still out there, waiting, looking for another kid, another storm, another chance. And I had been so close to being one of the kids who never come back. It was a quiet December evening, and the snow had been falling for hours, covering the roads in a thick, undisturbed blanket of white. I was 19, home from college for winter break, and that night my parents were out of town at a holiday party. I didn't mind being home alone. In fact, I loved it. The house was cozy, the fireplace crackling, and I had the whole place to myself. I made hot chocolate, curled up on the couch, and put on a movie. Everything felt perfect until I heard the knock. A single loud knock on the front door. I froze. Who would be out in this weather? I glanced at the clock. 11:45 p.m. Way too late for visitors. A small, uneasy feeling crept up my spine. Slowly, I got up and walked to the door, peeking through the peephole. No one was there. The porch was empty. For a second, I thought, maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just the wind pushing against the door. I let out a nervous laugh and turned back toward the couch. Then it happened again. Knock. Louder this time. Closer. I spun around, heart racing. I checked the peephole again. Still, nothing. A thick feeling of unease settled in my chest. Stay calm. It's probably nothing. I made sure the door was locked, then double-checked the back door and windows. Everything was secure. I tried to ignore it, went back to the couch, and turned up the volume on the TV. A few minutes passed. Then, a sound. A soft creak from the kitchen. My heart stopped. The kitchen was at the back of the house, nowhere near the front door. I muted the TV, held my breath, listened. At first, nothing. Then another creak, like footsteps, coming from inside the house. I sat there completely still, listening. The kitchen was dark, just beyond the hallway. I couldn't see anything from where I was sitting, but I knew something was there. Another sound, a slow, dragging noise, like someone moving carefully, trying not to be heard. I grabbed my phone from the couch, fingers trembling as I unlocked it. No service. The storm must have knocked out the signal. Panic started creeping in. I needed to get to the front door. I stood up as quietly as possible, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Then, another noise, this time closer, a soft click, like a door shutting. I turned toward the hallway, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, a tall figure standing at the end of the hall, just standing there, watching me. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, he took a step forward. That's when I ran, straight for the front door. My hands fumbled with the lock, shaking so hard I could barely turn it. Behind me, I could hear heavy footsteps, fast, coming straight toward me. I threw the door open just as he lunged. The freezing air hit me as I stumbled outside, slipping in the thick snow. I turned. The door slammed shut, locked. I scrambled back, panting, staring at the house. The porch light flickered. The windows were dark, no movement, no sound, just the quiet snowfall, like nothing had happened, like no one had ever been inside. The police arrived 15 minutes later. They searched the entire house, every room, every closet, every dark corner. Nothing. No footprints in the snow except for mine. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. It didn't make sense. I knew what I had heard, what I had seen. But according to them, no one had been inside. I never stayed in that house alone again. And even now, when winter storms roll in, I think about that night. The knock at the door, the shadow in the hallway, and the way the door locked itself, right after he disappeared, like something in that house had let him in, and then made sure he never left. It had been snowing for days, the kind of heavy snowfall that buried cars, swallowed roads, and turned the world into a silent, endless white. I was a junior in college, living alone in a tiny off-campus apartment, tucked at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't the best place. Old pipes, creaky floors, a front door that stuck in the cold. But it was cheap, and that was all I cared about. That night, I had just finished studying when the power flickered, then went out completely. I sighed, grabbing my phone to use as a flashlight. Power outages were common in storms like this. Nothing to worry about. I decided to call my landlord just in case. No signal. Not surprising. The snowstorm had been getting worse all day. I sighed, moving toward the window. Outside, the world was a blur of white, the streetlights barely visible through the falling snow. No cars, no people. Just empty roads and endless silence. I turned away, reaching for a candle on my desk. That's when I heard it. A sound from the hallway. A soft, slow knock on my door. I froze. No one was supposed to be here. I didn't have roommates. I wasn't expecting anyone. And no one in their right mind would be out this late in a storm like this. The knock came again, louder this time, a deep, hollow sound echoing through the dark apartment. I swallowed, forcing myself to move toward the door. Stay calm. It's probably just a neighbor. But deep down, I knew that wasn't right. This was a quiet building. Most of my neighbors were older, rarely home, or kept to themselves. And something about the way the knock sounded, it wasn't hurried or casual. It was slow, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side wasn't in a rush, like they had all the time in the world. I took a deep breath and peered through the peephole. At first, I didn't see anything, just the dimly lit hallway, the pale light flickering overhead. Then, a figure stepped into view. A man, tall, too tall, dressed in a long, dark coat, his face hidden in shadows. He just stood there, not knocking anymore, not moving, just waiting. A cold chill ran down my spine. Something was wrong. I didn't know how, but I felt it. I backed away from the door, heart pounding. Then, my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. A text from an unknown number. Don't open the door. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Then another knock, louder, sharper, and a voice, low, raspy, barely above a whisper. I know you're in there. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. I clutched my phone, my pulse pounding in my ears. The text message still glowed on my screen. Don't open the door. My mind raced. Who sent this? And more importantly, how did they know? I slowly stepped back, keeping my eyes on the door. Then, the handle turned. I stopped breathing. It didn't jiggle like someone testing the lock. Number it turned slowly, carefully, like whoever was on the other side already knew it was locked, like they were waiting for me to make a mistake. My knees felt weak. I had to do something. I took a deep breath and called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then, a whisper. "You should let me in." My blood turned to ice. The voice was too soft, too slow, like the words were being measured, like they were rehearsed. I backed away, my fingers shaking as I texted back the unknown number. Me, who is this? No reply. I glanced at the peephole again. He was still there, standing completely still, except his head was tilted now, like he was listening, like he knew I was watching. I turned away from the door and ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, checked the back window, made sure the back door was locked. Another buzz. I looked at my phone. A new message from the same unknown number. He's not alone. My breath hitched. I turned toward the window. At first, all I saw was snow, endless, swirling white. Then, a shadow moved. My stomach twisted. Someone was standing near the trees, far enough to be hidden, close enough to be watching. A wave of pure fear washed over me. This wasn't just some guy messing around. There were two of them, and they were waiting. For what? For me to panic? To run? To open the door? I pressed my back against the wall, gripping the knife tighter. Think, think, think. The power was out. My phone barely had signal. I was alone. No neighbors nearby. No one would hear me scream. I turned back toward the door, and that's when I saw it. A slip of paper now wedged under the doorframe. I hadn't heard it being pushed in, hadn't seen him move, but it was there. I bent down slowly, my hands trembling as I picked it up. It was just one sentence, written in small, neat letters. Let us in, or we come in anyway. I felt my blood turn to ice. A loud bang slammed against the door. Then another, and another. The door shook on its hinges. Story 4. The storm had come out of nowhere. 1 minute the roads were clear, the next blinding snow, icy winds and zero visibility. I had been driving for hours, heading to my parents' house for the holidays, when my GPS lost signal. Then my phone died. Now I was lost. The road signs were covered in snow and every turn looked the same. Endless white fields and dark twisting trees. The gas tank was running low. I had two choices. Keep driving and risk getting stranded in the middle of nowhere. Find shelter and wait out the storm. Then I saw it, a house. Not just any house. A large old Victorian mansion, sitting alone on a hill, its windows glowing faintly against the storm. A wave of relief washed over me. I had found civilization. I pulled into the long, snow-covered driveway, tires crunching loudly in the silence. The house looked well-maintained, but too quiet. No other cars, no signs of movement, just the faint flickering light in the window. Still, it was better than freezing to death in my car. I stepped out, wrapping my coat tightly around me, and made my way up the creaking wooden steps. Then, I knocked. A few seconds passed. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. The wind howled through the trees, making the porch railing groan. Then, the door creaked open. I stepped back, heart pounding. An old man stood in the doorway, tall, thin, dressed in dark clothes, his face partially hidden in the dim light. "Lost?" he asked, his voice low and scratchy. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, my car, I got caught in the storm. I was hoping to use a phone." For a second, he just stared at me. Then slowly, he stepped aside. "Come in." I hesitated. Something about him felt off. But the wind was brutal, and I didn't have a better option. I stepped inside. The house was warm, but oddly silent. No ticking clocks, no humming radiators, no sound of a TV or music playing. Just quiet. The hallway was lined with portraits, old, faded, people with hollow expressions, their eyes following me as I walked. The old man shut the door behind me. "I don't have a phone," he muttered. I blinked. "No landline?" He shook his head. "Storm knocked out the power. No phone, no radio, nothing." My stomach twisted. I had assumed someone in a house this size would have something. "You're welcome to wait here until morning," he continued, his voice calm. "Storm should pass by then." I nodded slowly. "Thanks. I appreciate it." I forced a smile, but my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. The old man turned. "Come, I'll show you where you can rest." I followed him down the long hallway, past the portraits, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. Then I noticed it. One of the paintings, a large portrait of a family, a man, a woman, and a boy. I stopped in my tracks. The boy in the painting looked exactly like me. Same dark hair, same sharp jawline, same tired eyes. It was like staring at an older version of myself. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The old man stopped too. He turned his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You look just like him." My throat went dry. "Like who?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, in that same slow, deliberate tone, he muttered, "My grandson." I swallowed hard. "Oh, where is he now?" The old man's expression darkened. "Dead." My chest tightened. The hallway suddenly felt colder. I forced a small laugh. "That's sorry to hear that." He didn't react, just kept staring at the painting. Then he finally turned, motioning for me to follow. "This way." A sinking feeling settled in my gut as I followed him deeper into the house. Somewhere above us, a floorboard creaked, like someone was walking upstairs. Except he had said we were alone. The floorboard creaked above us. My chest tightened. I stopped walking, staring at the ceiling. Another creak, slow, heavy, like someone was moving upstairs. I turned to the old man. "I thought you said you were alone." His expression didn't change. "I am." His voice was flat, emotionless. The house felt colder. Something was off. Everything in me screamed, "Leave." But the storm outside was still raging, and my car was practically buried in snow. "Stay calm. Don't overthink." Maybe the house was just settling. Maybe it was just the wind. I forced a casual smile. "Must be the house shifting," I muttered. He didn't reply, just turned and continued walking down the hall. I hesitated. Then I followed. He led me to a guest room at the end of the hallway. The room was simple, A small bed with a thick wool blanket, a single wooden chair in the corner, a window facing the storm outside. I dropped my bag near the bed, trying to shake off the unease. "You should get some rest," the old man said, standing in the doorway. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, thanks." He lingered for a second. Then he shut the door. The lock clicked. I froze. Did he just lock me in? I swallowed hard, listening. His footsteps faded down the hall. Then, silence. I exhaled slowly. "Calm down. You're overthinking." But something still felt wrong. I walked to the window, peering outside. The snow was still falling hard, covering the ground in thick, untouched white. No footprints, no tracks leading to the house. I frowned. Had the old man been here alone all this time? Had anyone ever come to visit him? My stomach twisted. I turned away from the window and glanced at the wooden chair. Something about it bothered me. It wasn't just a chair, it was a rocking chair, and it was still moving. A slow, steady creak, like someone had been sitting there just moments ago. I backed up toward the bed, my pulse racing. Then, the closet door creaked open. A sliver of darkness peered through the gap. I stopped breathing. I hadn't touched the closet. I stared at the crack, my heartbeat pounding. A new sound filled the room. Breathing, slow, heavy, coming from inside the closet. I grabbed my phone. The screen was dark, dead. "You need to get out. Now." I moved toward the door, grabbing the handle. It didn't budge. The old man had locked it from the outside. Panic set in. I banged on the door. "Hey, open up!" No answer. The breathing from the closet grew louder, then a whisper. "Why did you come back?" My entire body went cold. I spun toward the closet, my back pressed against the door. The whisper had been so close, right behind the wooden slats. I swallowed hard. I don't know what you mean," I stammered. Silence. Then, a slow, pale hand slid through the gap in the door. I let out a choked scream, stumbling backward. The closet door creaked open wider, and I saw it. A figure crouched in the darkness. Long limbs, hollow eyes. It looked just like me, but wrong. Twisted, its face tilted at an unnatural angle, lips curling into a slow, eerie grin. It stepped forward, and I realized it wasn't breathing. It was mimicking my own breaths. I scrambled at the doorknob, twisting it desperately. The lock clicked open. I fell into the hallway, my legs weak, gasping for air. I turned. The closet was empty. The rocking chair was still now. The old man stood at the end of the hall watching me, expressionless. "You saw him, didn't you?" he muttered. I swallowed hard. "What was that?" His eyes darkened. "That was my grandson." Story 4. Part 3, rephrased in extended version. I stared at the old man. His words echoed in my head. "That was my grandson." My throat went dry. "But he's dead," I whispered. The old man's face remained blank. "Yes." A cold shudder ran through me. I turned back toward the room. The closet was still open, empty, like there had never been anything inside. But I knew what I had seen. The breathing, the pale hand, the face, my face, but twisted, broken. It had been real. I felt the old man's gaze on me. "You should leave." His voice was calm, too calm, like he was giving me a warning, like he knew something I didn't. I didn't argue. I grabbed my bag, my coat, and stepped out into the hallway. The house felt different now, colder, darker. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch me as I walked past. I didn't look at them. I just kept moving. The old man followed, his footsteps slow and measured. "You shouldn't have come here," he muttered. I glanced at him. "Why?" His expression was grim. "Because now, he knows where to find you." A chill crept up my spine. I reached the front door, fumbled with the lock, stepped out into the snow. The storm had calmed. The world was eerily silent. I turned back to thank him, but the house was dark. The front door was already closed, and through the frosted window, I saw him, the old man, standing completely still, watching me, like he was waiting. I practically ran to my car, brushed off the thick layer of snow, got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The heater whined, struggling to warm the frozen air. I took a deep breath, tried to calm my racing heart. Then, I glanced up at the house. Something was wrong. The house looked different. The windows, dark, empty. The porch, covered in fresh snow, like no one had walked on it for days. Like the house had been abandoned for years. I felt sick. I had just been inside, hadn't I? I stared at the frosted glass, at my own reflection. Then, it moved. Not my face, not me. The reflection in the window twisted, its jaw stretched too wide, its eyes turned hollow. It grinned, not at me, at the thing sitting in my back seat. A pale, bony figure, with my face, smiling, waiting. The last thing I heard before I screamed was my own voice whispering, "Why did you come back?" Story 5. The snowstorm had shut everything down. No traffic, no working streetlights, no open stores. It was midnight, and the roads were completely empty. Just me, my car, and the blizzard swallowing the world. I had been driving for nearly 2 hours trying to reach my cousin's house for the weekend, but now I was hopelessly lost. My GPS kept glitching. My phone had no signal, and the road signs were covered in ice. Everything looked the same, just endless white snow and tall, lifeless trees. I kept thinking, I should have stayed home. Then, my headlights flickered. A warning light flashed on my dashboard. Low fuel. Panic crept up my spine. I needed to find a gas station, fast. Then, out of nowhere, I saw it. A small diner, sitting alone at the edge of the woods. Its neon open sign flickered weakly through the snow. It looked old, run down, but it was my only option. I pulled into the parking lot, my tires crunching over the ice. The place was dead silent. No other cars, no footprints in the snow. Just the faint glow of the diner's windows. I turned off the engine, stepping out into the freezing air. The moment I shut the door, a strange feeling washed over me. Something about this place felt wrong, like it wasn't supposed to be here, like it had been waiting. I ignored the feeling and headed toward the entrance. The door creaked as I pushed it open. A bell jingled above me. Inside, the diner was small and outdated, the kind of place stuck in the 1950s. Black and white checkered floors, faded red leather booths, a long counter lined with rusty stools. A single waitress stood behind the counter. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she looked like she was expecting me. She smiled. "Cold night, huh?" I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, real bad out there." She nodded, grabbing a coffee pot. "You look lost." I hesitated. "Yeah, actually, I was trying to get to Fairview. My GPS cut out." She poured the coffee, sliding a cup toward me. "Fairview's pretty far from here." I frowned. "How far?" She tilted her head. "Depends." I didn't like that answer. I took a sip of the coffee. It was hot and strong. The warmth settled my nerves. Just a little. That's when I noticed it. The diner had no music playing, no sound from a kitchen, no faint chatter from a radio or a TV. Just silence, like the place was holding its breath. Then I noticed something else. The clock on the wall. The hands weren't moving. It was stuck at 12:06. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I turned back to the waitress. She was still watching me. Then she spoke. "You should leave before he gets here." My stomach dropped. "What?" Her expression darkened. "He's coming soon. If you're smart, you'll get back in your car and drive." I swallowed hard. "Who?" She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, the bell above the door jingled. I froze. A man had just walked in, tall, thin, wearing an old-fashioned black suit, covered in snow. His face was pale and expressionless, but his eyes were locked onto mine, like he had been searching for me, like he had just found me. The waitress whispered under her breath, "Too late." The bell above the door jingled. I froze. The man who had just walked in was Wrong. Tall. Too tall. Pale skin, almost gray. Black suit, dusted with snow. But it wasn't his appearance that made my stomach tighten. It was his eyes. Black, hollow, and locked directly onto me. Like he had been waiting for me to arrive. Like he had found what he was looking for. The waitress inhaled sharply. Too late. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, gripping my coffee cup like it was somehow a weapon. The man didn't blink, didn't move, just stood in the doorway, letting the cold wind swirl around him. Then, he stepped forward. One slow, deliberate step, then another. The diner felt smaller now. I turned to the waitress. "Who is he?" I asked under my breath. She didn't answer. She just backed away from the counter, like she wanted nothing to do with what was about to happen. The man reached the booth across from me. He didn't sit. He just stood there, watching, waiting. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was low, deep, like it was coming from somewhere far away. I forced a nervous chuckle. "Yeah, well, I got lost in the storm," I muttered. I was just about to leave. His expression didn't change, but he tilted his head slightly. "Number you weren't." A chill ran through me. He took another step forward. I instinctively leaned back. Something about him made my body scream to run. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice unsteady. He ignored the question. Instead, he glanced at the waitress. She didn't meet his eyes. She just stared at the floor, like she was scared to even look at him. My stomach knotted. Something was very, very wrong. I turned back to him, and my breath caught. He was now sitting in the booth across from me. I hadn't even seen him move. But somehow, he was there. His hands were folded neatly on the table. He smiled. But it wasn't a real smile. It was just teeth. "We've met before." My blood ran cold. I had never seen him in my life. Had I? A creeping feeling slithered up my spine. "No, we haven't," the man chuckled. "Not in this life." The waitress suddenly dropped the coffee pot. The glass shattered, steaming liquid spilling across the floor. She looked terrified. "You need to go," she whispered to me. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket, pulling out a few crumpled bills and tossing them on the counter. The man across from me tilted his head again. "Running won't help." I ignored him. I rushed for the door. The moment my hand touched the handle, the diner lights flickered. Then everything went dark. The lights went out. Everything plunged into darkness. For a moment, I couldn't see anything, just the sound of the storm howling outside. And then, a whisper, right beside my ear. "You're exactly where you need to be." I spun around, heart racing. Nothing. The diner was silent. I reached for my phone. Still dead. The waitress's breathing was shaky. I could barely make out her silhouette in the dark. "He's playing with you," she whispered. A chill ran down my spine. "Who is he?" I demanded. The lights flickered back on, and my stomach dropped. The diner was empty. The man in the suit was gone. No footprints in the snow by the door. No sign that he had ever been here. But I knew. I felt it. He was still here, watching, waiting. The waitress grabbed my arm, her fingers ice cold. "You need to listen to me," she said, her voice trembling. "Get in your car. Don't look back. And whatever you do, don't stop driving." My pulse pounded. What does he want?" She shook her head. "It's not about what he wants. It's about what you've already given him." My breath hitched. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. I turned toward the door, gripping the handle so hard my knuckles ached. I stepped outside into the snow, the freezing wind biting at my skin. I climbed into my car, started the engine, locked the doors. The waitress stood at the diner entrance watching me. For a second, I considered staying. Then, a figure appeared in my rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat. I choked on my own breath. I didn't want to look. I couldn't look. But my body betrayed me. I turned my head, and the back seat was empty. I was alone. Right? I threw the car into drive, sped onto the icy road. The diner faded behind me. The snowstorm grew worse. The road stretched out into nothingness. I didn't stop, didn't check my mirrors, didn't dare breathe. Then I saw it, up ahead, A neon sign glowing through the storm. The diner. The same flickering open sign. My breath came out in shallow gasps. Number no, no, no. I had been driving straight. How was I back here? I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. I pressed harder on the gas. Faster. The road stretched ahead of me. Another mile. 2 miles. Then, the diner appeared again, like I had never left. The waitress was still standing outside, like she had never moved. She lifted a hand and waved. I slammed on the brakes, my chest heaving. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. I had to go inside. Had to figure this out. Then, my phone buzzed. The screen was still black, but somehow a text appeared from a number I didn't recognize. Don't go back inside. My throat went dry. Who is this? I texted back, my fingers trembling. 3 dots appeared. Then, you don't remember me, but he does. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, the car radio turned on by itself. The same deep, hollow voice from the diner whispered through the speakers. It's too late. You're already his. Story 6, the blizzard came fast. One moment, the sky was clear, the roads dry. The next, I could barely see 5 feet ahead. The highway had been empty for miles. No cars behind me. No headlights ahead. Just endless snow swallowing the road. I checked my fuel gauge, almost empty. Panic crept into my chest. I had been driving for hours trying to make it home for the holidays. But now I was lost, alone, and running out of gas. Then I saw it, a motel sign glowing through the storm. Hollow Pines Motel. The letters blinked weakly, barely visible through the heavy snow. It looked old, forgotten. The kind of place people don't talk about. The kind of place where things go missing. I didn't care. I needed shelter, a phone, a way out of this storm. I pulled into the empty parking lot. The moment I turned off the engine, I felt it. That deep, crawling sense of wrongness. Like I had just made a mistake. Like I was being watched. The motel stood in silence. 2 floors, peeling paint, a single flickering light outside the office. I stepped out of the car, snow crunching under my boots. The air was thick and heavy, too quiet. I walked toward the lobby door, hesitating for just a second. Then I pushed it open. A bell jingled. The warmth inside hit me like a wave. But something was off. The room smelled stale. The furniture was old, worn down. And behind the desk, a man sat completely still. His suit was too neat, his expression blank. But his eyes locked onto mine the second I stepped in, like he had been waiting. You need a room? His voice was flat, mechanical. I swallowed hard. Yeah, just for the night. He didn't blink, just reached under the desk, pulled out a key. Room 203. I hesitated. Do you need my name? Credit card? A long pause, then, number. We already have everything we need. A cold shiver ran through me. I took the key. Something about it felt wrong, like it was too cold, too heavy. I turned toward the staircase. The clerk's voice stopped me. One rule. I looked back. He was still staring, unblinking. Don't open the door between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. My pulse skipped. I let out a nervous chuckle. What? His face didn't change. Don't open the door. A thick, uneasy feeling crept up my spine, but I didn't argue. I just nodded. Okay. Then I walked up the stairs. Room 203 was unsettling. The furniture was too old. The air felt thick, stale. The TV only played static. I dropped my bag on the bed, checking my phone. No signal. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I just needed to sleep. Then in the morning I could leave. I sat on the bed, kicking off my boots. Then I noticed something. The bathroom door, slightly open. I frowned. I hadn't gone in there yet. I reached for the handle, pushing it open. The mirror was cracked. The sink still had droplets of water in it, like someone had just used it. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. I stepped back into the room, heart pounding. Stop overthinking. I lay down, pulling the blanket over myself. The wind howled outside. The old heater rattled in the corner. Slowly, my eyes grew heavy. I was just about to fall asleep when a sound made my blood run cold. Knocking. Software slow. Coming from my door. I sat up, my heart pounding. I grabbed my phone, checking the time. 3:07 a.m. I swallowed hard. The clerk's words echoed in my head. Don't open the door between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. Another knock. Louder, more urgent. A voice followed. Please, let me in. I felt ice crawl up my spine. It was a woman's voice, software shaky. Please, something is out here. My breath shook. I hesitated. Maybe she was real. Maybe she needed help. Then something happened, something that made me stay frozen in place. A second knock. But this one was wrong. It didn't come from the door. It came from the closet, behind me. I turned slowly. The closet door was closed, but I could hear it. A soft, deliberate knock, like someone was inside, waiting. The knocking continued, software deliberate. One knock from the door, one knock from the closet, like they were answering each other. I gripped the blanket, my breath coming out in short, shaky gasps. Please, open the door. The woman's voice was soft, desperate. Something is out here. It's coming. My hands shook. I wanted to help, but something deep inside me, a primal instinct, was screaming not to move. I checked my phone again. 3:11 a.m. 4 more minutes. I just had to wait 4 more minutes. The knocking grew louder, faster, now coming from everywhere. The door, the closet, even the bathroom, like something was circling me. The woman's voice turned panicked. Please, it's coming. It's right behind me. I clenched my teeth. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Then, the knocking stopped. Silence. For a moment I thought, maybe it was over. Then, a whisper. But it wasn't from the door, or the closet, or the bathroom. It came from right beside my bed. I know you're awake. My body locked up. The air in the room felt thick, heavy. I didn't want to look. I couldn't. But I felt it. Something. Someone. Standing inches away. Watching me. Why won't you help me? A wave of cold air hit me. The blankets shifted slightly, like something was moving beneath them. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay still. 3:13 a.m., just 2 more minutes. A single finger touched my arm. I nearly screamed. It was ice cold, not like a human touch, more like something dead. You always ignore me. The voice was quieter now, almost sad. I squeezed my eyes shut. 1 more minute, just 1 more minute. Then, a loud bang. The closet door flew open. I gasped, whipping my head toward it. Empty. Nothing was inside. But I knew. Something had just left it. I felt it. The presence was gone. I grabbed my phone. 3:15 a.m. It was over. The rest of the night I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for something else to happen. But the room was quiet. Too quiet. Like whatever had been there was just waiting for another night. By morning, I had made up my mind. I was leaving. I grabbed my bag, opened the door, and froze. A piece of paper was taped to the wall outside my room. A single sentence written in small, shaky letters. You're the only one who made it through the night. My stomach twisted. I hurried downstairs, reaching the lobby. The front desk was empty. No sign of the clerk. I called out, "Hello?" Silence. I hesitated, then reached over the counter to ring the service bell. But my hand stopped, because there, sitting on the desk, was my room key. Except now the number on it wasn't 203, it was 107. I stared at it, my skin crawling. Then, a draft. I turned. The hallway behind the desk was dark. The doors along it were slightly open. Every single one had a number painted on it. 102, 103, 104, but no 105, no 106. Just the last door at the end, 107. I took a step back. That's when I saw it. Through the crack of room 107's door, a single wide eye watching me. I ran. I didn't care about my bag, didn't care about the snowstorm. I just bolted to my car, started the engine, and sped away. I didn't stop, didn't look back. Not until I saw a town sign nearly an hour later. I pulled over, hands shaking, heart racing, took a deep breath. Then, grabbed my phone. For the first time in hours, it finally had signal. I quickly Googled the motel. My breath hitched. Hollow Pines Motel, closed since 1986. I dropped my phone. I had just spent the night in a place that didn't exist, a place that was supposed to be gone. And worst of all, I wasn't the first one, but I might be the only one who made it out. Story 7. It started with a phone call. I was home alone, stretched out on the couch, scrolling through my phone when my landline rang. I frowned. Nobody ever called the landline. My parents barely used it. It rang again. Reluctantly, I got up and answered. Hello? Silence, then a whisper. Don't look outside. My breath hitched. What? The line went dead. I pulled the phone away, my fingers shaking slightly. A prank? Some kid messing around? I turned toward the living room window. Outside, the street was quiet. The houses were dark, empty looking. It had started snowing again, light flakes swirling in the dim glow of the streetlights. Everything looked normal. Still, my stomach knotted. I told myself to ignore it. It was just a call, nothing to be afraid of. Then, the phone rang again. I jumped, hesitated, then slowly picked it up. Don't look outside. The same whispered voice. I swallowed hard. Who is this? No answer, just soft breathing. Then, a click. The call ended. I stood there, heart pounding. A weird, creeping sensation crawled up my spine. I turned toward the window again. The snow was falling harder now. Still, nothing outside. No movement, no figures. Just my reflection staring back at me. I exhaled. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I stepped closer, and my stomach dropped. Because in the reflection, I wasn't alone. There was something standing behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. The room was empty, but I knew what I had seen. I took a step back, my heart racing. Then, knocking, not from the door, not from the walls, but from the window. A slow, deliberate tap. I turned back, hands shaking. The glass was fogging up, like someone was breathing against it. Then, a single word appeared, written into the condensation. Run! The word run sat there on the window, fresh, like someone had just written it. My breath shook. The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. I took a step back, forcing myself to think. This isn't real. Someone is messing with you. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling. I dialed 911. The call failed, no signal. My stomach twisted. I turned back to the window. The word run had started to fade. The condensation was disappearing, but something new was appearing in its place. A shadow, a figure standing outside in the snow. Tall, motionless, staring directly at me. I stumbled back, heart slamming in my chest. Who the hell is that? I ran toward the door, checking the lock. Locked. I grabbed the curtains, ready to shut them. Then the phone rang again. I froze. It was the landline, still ringing. I didn't want to answer it, but my body moved on its own. I picked it up, pressing the phone to my ear. Silence. Then, why didn't you listen? The whisper sent ice through my veins. My grip tightened on the phone. Who are you? I snapped. Another long pause, then, he's inside. My blood ran cold. A soft creak sounded behind me. I spun around. The closet door was open. I couldn't breathe. The door had been closed just moments ago. I was sure of it. My fingers tightened around the phone. I whispered, almost afraid to hear my own voice. Who's inside? The phone clicked. Silence. The hair on my arm stood up. Slowly, I turned toward the closet. It was too dark to see inside. The hallway light barely reached into the space, but something felt off, like the darkness was too thick, like it wasn't just an empty space. Then, a whisper from inside the closet. Come closer. I backed away. Number no way in hell. I grabbed the door handle and slammed the closet shut, locked it. I stepped back, my breathing shaky. Then, knocking. Loud. From inside the closet. The door shook. Something wanted out. My pulse hammered. I turned, sprinting toward the front door. I grabbed the lock and froze. The door was unlocked. I had locked it. I was sure of it. But now it was wide open, and the snow outside was untouched. No footprints leading in, like nothing had ever entered, like it had been here the whole time, watching me. The front door stood open. Cold air pushed into the house, making the curtains sway. But the snow outside, untouched. No footprints, no signs that anyone had walked in. My heart pounded. I reached for the door handle, ready to slam it shut. Then, a single footprint appeared in the snow, right at the edge of the doorway, like something invisible had just stepped inside. I stumbled back. No! 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 I grabbed the door, yanking it closed, locking it fast. The moment the bolt clicked, the closet door rattled violently. A deep, slow knocking shook the wood, like something was trapped inside, like it was laughing. I backed into the living room. The curtains fluttered, the lights flickered, the air felt thick, like I was breathing underwater. Then, my landline rang again. I jumped, my whole body trembling. I didn't want to answer it, but I had to. I picked up the phone. Hello? Silence. Then, breathing. Low, shallow, like someone was right behind me. I gripped the receiver, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? A long pause, then, check the mirror. My stomach dropped. I turned, and my blood ran cold. The hallway mirror, it was fogging up, like something was breathing against it. Then, words began to appear, written by an unseen hand. Turn around. I felt a rush of cold air on my neck, like someone was standing inches behind me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I did the worst possible thing. I turned around, and I saw it. A figure, tall, distorted, wrong, standing in the dark hallway. It looked exactly like me, but not. Its jaw was too long. Its eyes were hollow black voids, and it was smiling. You should have never answered the phone. I ran straight for the front door. I grabbed the handle, but the door wouldn't budge, like something was holding it shut. I turned, my heartbeat slamming in my chest. The figure was closer now, its head tilted, like it was studying me. I grabbed a lamp from the table and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered. The moment it did, the lights flickered, the air shifted, and just like that, everything stopped. The house was silent again. The air felt lighter. Normal. The figure was gone. The closet door was closed. And my phone? Dead. Like it had never rung in the first place. I stood there, my breath coming in shaky gasps. Then, my phone vibrated. A single notification. Unknown number. See you next time. I grabbed my keys, my coat, my shoes. I didn't care about the snowstorm. I was leaving. I didn't stop driving until I saw the city lights ahead, until I was far, far away. And even now, when my phone rings in the middle of the night, I don't answer, because I know it's not over. And one day I might not be fast enough to run.